Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Jojy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode on the Deconstructed Woman. We are focusing today on self-care and burnout in women. I know this is a topic that will resonate with many of us that are working and having children or stay-at-home moms and having children. So this was an important topic for Elisa, my partner. So I'm going to go ahead and let her start off by talking about why this is so meaningful for her.
So I think that I have to kind of go back a little bit. So I do a lot of podcasts and books, and I follow a lot of people on social media that talk about self-care. And it's something that I kind of am inundated with on a daily basis. But it's interesting because that actual term, somebody had said a couple months back, because I do these summits where they have, 50 women talk on 3 days. And somebody said, I hate the term self-care. And I was right behind her. I don't like the term self-care. I think because for me, it does kind of have this negative connotation, which I think was kind of in the some of the articles that you had sent over, Jojy, that we were kind of looking at and mulling over as we were preparing for this episode. But a lot of times there's this feeling, and this is, in the article, it talks about we have to get over this, but self-care feels selfish. And for me, I'm not one of those people that likes to pamper myself and go to the, get a massage or get a pedicure or whatever. And so to me, it's like not only selfish, but it's costly. And that was part of that article was talking about, well, it doesn't need to be. Self-care isn't always only just about taking care of yourself or pampering yourself physically, but it's about creating, time for yourself in your daily or weekly basis. And I think that that's something that, again, really resonates for me because I have these 3 small children and a lot of my time is devoted to them. And I get home from work and then it's, switch my hat from work person to now mom mode, where it's get dinner on the table, baths, bedtimes, and then clean up the house. And so by the time I'm falling into bed, it's like, well, when was there time for self-care? I had a full plate. So that's what it looks like for me. But I think that there's a lot of different offshoots of that.
Yeah. I mean, while you were talking, I was thinking about, self-care, the term, makes it feel like, and I think the article talked about this as well, like self-care has this implication of women, you deserve it, make time for yourself. But when you deserve it is tied to the phrase self-care, then that's where the images of spending money to pamper yourself or carving out time for it starts to get involved. And I think a lot of women struggle with spending money to take care of themselves. The other thing I thought about when you were talking, Lisa, was the fact that, on one hand, now that I've been through child rearing and I've made it through the other side, I feel like I do have more time to do that. But when you're in the throes of working full time and raising children full time, I almost feel like it's harder to have the discipline to take a moment out, and find that moment, whether you're transitioning from work to home before you fully change that hat over from one to another. I think the commitment or the discipline to make time for those individual moments. I think the article talked about, taking a moment to meditate or look at nature or find little increments of time. In so many ways, I think that discipline is harder than carving out an hour for a massage, because you could get childcare for your children for an hour, have a family member take care of them or whatever, work out a timetable with your partner to cover the kids for that time. But to be able to have the self-discipline to take a time out for yourself because you value yourself and your mental health, a lot more challenging in my opinion. What do you think about that, since you're in the throes of that right now?
Yeah, and I think that, the reason that this topic came up was because I was reading an article and they were talking about how if you don't do that, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't make the time for your own mental health, the ripple effects of that on your family, on your colleagues, on your life, and the people that you interact with. And that really stuck with me because I was thinking, obviously I'm trying to raise these children in a certain way and have a relationship with my husband and all these things. But I do find that my frustration tolerance is lower when I'm burnt out or overwhelmed, or I mean, burnt out probably is kind of a stronger term, but I do feel that there are times when I am just at my wits end and I've kind of hit the final straw. And at those points when I'm at the lowest, that's where I can say to myself, okay, I need to do something. I need to change. But then I fall into, well, what does that look like? And I think that that was discussed too, is that for some of us, again, self-care doesn't come naturally. I don't naturally know what I need, but I know I need something because if I don't do it, it's going to have this ripple effect on my family that I take care of myself.
Yeah, I remember, when I tried to fit in working out, in addition to working and having a child in middle school. And I remember the exhaustion I felt, and the working out wasn't, I don't think it did an iota of good for me, because I was rushing out of work, rushing to work out, rushing home to put dinner on the table. And at some point I just realized that my whole day is just rushing. I'm trying to fit it all in, and I'm trying to be positive about it, and I'm trying to feel good about the decision to work out. But really, I was just struggling with getting from point A to point B to point C, and I wasn't enjoying any of it. And I felt guilty for leaving late from work because that cut into my workout time. Because if I stayed and did the full class at workout, then that would mean that dinner would be late. And so what I found was that even working out just added to my stress. And so there again, I had to look at, well, what's the best thing for me and my stress level? Is working out really solving what I'm hoping it will, or is it just adding to my stress? And, I just felt like it was better for me not to go out and work out, because it added to my exhaustion and my burnout more so. And I didn't really feel the health benefits or a stress debrief or the adrenaline, I'm sorry, the rush that you feel from working out. I didn't have any of that. I just felt even more exhausted by the time I got home, and felt like I was behind the eight ball, just in a different way. And so I do feel like, when you are on the road to burning out, you're making bad decisions, and the decisions are based on a point of mental exhaustion, not necessarily clear thinking. And so it is really difficult to navigate all the different things that we should do, quote unquote, to take care of ourselves. And I think it just leaves us feeling even more limited in our reserves for self care, for sure. So, Lisa, what have you found? Do you have any solutions? Are you thinking about doing small bits of taking care of yourself versus carving out time? Or what do you think is the plan that's going to work out best for you and your family and your career's needs right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it really it's kind of a soul searching process, but I know that there's certain things, that again, some people say like go back to what brings you joy. And I'm like, okay, well, when I was a kid, reading books and singing both brought me joy. And so finding ways to fit that in. I know that some of the times that I'm happiest is when I have like music playing and I'm just belting out in my kitchen while doing dishes. And so, that is a form of self care, even if it's, again, not like the traditional things. And so I think that for me, again, my focus is on finding something that brings me joy. I do a lot of audiobooks because sitting down and physically reading a book with three small children is, I'm not going to say impossible because I know a lot of people do it, but it's challenging. And so audiobooks are where it's at for me. I can listen to a book on the way to and from work. And then while I'm doing the dishes, assuming that it's, even if it's not kid friendly, then I just put my headphones in. But, I can listen and kind of escape for a little bit from like the stress of the day. And usually I'll do that like after I put the kids to bed, when I'm, kind of again trying to clean up, but like pairing that. So pairing a chore with something that brings me joy, I think that that's what I've heard kind of over time is, one way to kind of move in that direction. But I think that it's an ongoing process, because even that, there's still times where I feel pretty stressed. But I think that that's kind of part of where I'm at in my life. And, I just roll with it. Like, just roll with whatever comes in this stage and phase of life. But I think that finding what brings me joy, what brought me joy earlier in life, and trying to kind of implement that now, I think is at least one way to change up my day-to-day routines and things, and to give myself that break so that I can be, the best parent, best wife, best colleague that I can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that one of the things that was in the article that I shared had a lot to do with, this is just like another muscle that you have to practice and really exert, right? I mean, if you don't think about taking care of yourself and you don't practice taking care of yourself, then it's never going to happen on its own. And I will say that it's probably in the last 5 years that I've really started thinking about ways to take care of myself that don't require a lot of equipment, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. And really, what I'm going to talk about probably is like being mindful and mindfulness and being present. And I think it has a lot to do with what are the moments in your day that give you joy. And how do you access that feeling of joy by just focusing on yourself for a minute? And so I have really learned, I think, in the last 5 years, how to take advantage of almost those transitional moments from one to another. Simple things like when I walk from my car in our parking lot at work to the door, I really do enjoy like a walking meditation. And so being able to really be present and take note of the wind blowing, the sun shining, the cool air, the bird singing. And it sounds sort of silly, but I think that it really is what I have access to in that short period of time that brings me sort of to a centered place, that now I can go from what I left at my house to now at work and being fully committed here at work, and not letting anything else distract me. And that has been a really valuable thing for me, because I don't, though I do have the time, I'm not very good at carving out, 15, 20 minutes. It just still feels like that's a lot of time to commit to doing something called relaxation or taking care of myself. And I don't even know what that looks like or feels like. And so those fleeting moments have really become a moment of joy for me that helps me then re-energize myself. And when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about, when we fly on an airplane, they tell you about safety regulations and oxygen mask coming down, and how they tell you to put it on yourself or before you take care of a child. And doesn't that just seem so unnatural to us as parents, that we would take care of ourselves before we took care of our child? But then the one thing that they tell you is that if you're not able to breathe, you're not going to be able to take care of anyone else. And how do we cement that in our everyday moment to moment decision that allows us to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves before anything else? Because why do we firmly believe that taking care of ourselves is so selfish? I don't know how to pull that apart, tease it away from each other, even if I do it for myself. So I believe it. And if I believe it, then I can share that or let other people not affect me the way that I allow them to affect me.
Yeah,
What are your
that
thoughts about that oxygen mask dropping? You have a little baby, so I'm sure that that's even more difficult for you.
husband's mentality, and I don't know how he said that exact same thing to me. Like, he'll use the oxygen mask example and say, because there's plenty of times where I don't eat, I don't eat right away because I have to get food on the table for 3 kids and 3 cups of milk. And oh, and I got to make sure this one has their napkin and their forks and all the things. And so I eventually sit down and he's sitting there eating. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, well, I'm hungry too. But, he's like, I'm going to take care of me first and then I can take care of them. And I'm like, no, no, I don't know that that's the same thing. But I mean, maybe that's not the best example, but I think that for me, it is such a struggle. And I'm glad that you kind of circled back because we kind of started off talking about how self care seems selfish. To me, it does feel like, oh, I can't, I have to put everybody first. And I think that I do kind of fall in those very traditional kind of views of, I got to do it all and it has to be done. And so I'll take care of me or I'll sit down. But, these things have to get done first. And, again, my husband is of the mindset of, I'm going to take care of me. He'll say, okay, I'm going to go to the restroom before I take care of the baby. And I'm like, well, she needs to be taken care of now. And he's okay, she can wait. And that was like a foreign thing to me. And I laugh because it's just like, I don't know why it doesn't naturally come to me in that way. It naturally comes for him, but to me, well, I'll just do whatever needs to get done first, and my needs are not as important. And I think that definitely plays into me wanting to take care of myself. Just recently I went in and I did get a pedicure, and one of my children was sick. And so I came straight home afterwards, and my husband was like, why didn't you go out for coffee or, just like relax and just take some time for yourself? And I was like, because we had a sick kid. And he's like, yeah, she's fine. It was okay. But again, it just immediately felt like, okay, I've been out of the house for an hour. I got to go back. And I don't know if it all is set in traditional thoughts or if it's just, being a woman, but I don't know that I have a good understanding of it, but I know that that's how my brain works.
Yeah, I mean, and as you were talking, I was thinking about socialization for our different roles. I mean, I do feel that definitely men are raised to take care of themselves first. I'm married to a firstborn son. He's the oldest, and his self care is top notch. Like there, he takes good care of himself, and he doesn't have to justify that to anybody, including me. And there are days that I admire that about him, and then there are days that it just makes me crazy because why? Why don't I think like that? So I do feel like there's definitely a difference in the way each gender is raised. Women are raised to be nurturers, and somehow or other, implicitly, that means that we put ourselves last, and every single person, including our dogs, are put in front of us. And why is that? I don't know, but I do believe that it is gender based, and I do feel like we have taken on that role. And if we don't take it on, people push it on us, whether there are messages in media, messages in our families, messages in subtle ways that we identify as women. And so I don't think it's just you and your husband or just me and my husband. I think it has a lot to do with the way each gender is taught to be different. And, some other podcasting and two guys can talk about how hard it is to be men. I don't know if we're going to ever cover that in this podcast necessarily, but I definitely see male privilege as being something that I would aspire to get. Do you think that there's anything that we can do to balance that out? What if I was to say to you, Lisa, how do we teach your daughters at this young age to make time for themselves so that we don't have them repeat the cycle of women putting themselves last? How would you respond to that?
Gosh. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd have to really mull that over because I definitely want them to be able to counteract that. But I already see my daughter doing exactly the same. My 7-year-old does exactly the same thing as I do. And she's
In what
only
ways
7.
does she do that?
Well, I'm trying to think of a good example, because I've just seen it, and I told her, like, she was helping me with something, and I was like, "Okay, well, just go. We'll finish up in a little bit, but, like, go, change clothes or get comfortable or whatever." And she's like, "No, I have to finish this." And I was like, "No, it's okay. Like, you don't have to finish this project. Like, we can come back to it." And she's like, "No, I need to get this done because then I'm going to, she's very highly organized like me." And it was like, you can stop. You can, break things up. You don't have to necessarily do that. And she puts her brother and sister ahead of her in almost everything that she does. And it's just very interesting to see her sometimes. I'll tell her, like, okay, I'll tell my son to go clean his room, and she goes and helps him. And I'm like, "You don't have to help him." And she's like, I need to do this. Like, that nurturing and that concept of putting herself last or doing whatever. I just kind of see that playing out with her. And so I've already tried to verbally tell her, no, you can take time for yourself. No, you don't have to put other people first. But I don't know that I'm modeling that for her as well as I could be. And so I think that again goes back to that concept of, if taking time for myself, what is she learning? She's learning, like, herself, and does all the things. And then she falls into bed at 10 o'clock at night, because sometimes she's the last one up with me. And she sees me, and I think she's asked me, like, "Why do you have to, sweep the floors and do the dishes?" And I'm like, "Well, because then it won't get done." And she's like, "But why?" Like, she's questioning that. And so I think that it's interesting, but I strongly want her to know that she can, really step back from that and fulfill her own needs. But I think that it also comes from me starting to model that a little bit better too.
Yeah. And I mean, as I was hearing you, I was like, oh my goodness, this is one more thing for us to stress about now because are we giving our kids mixed messages like, say, take care of yourself, but I'm not taking care of myself? And I think, women do take to heart what they want to model for their kids. And we can only do the best that we can. And, our kids will figure it out because they're resilient. And I will tell you that my daughter is extremely focused on self care and she figured it out somehow, and I don't think that I was, you know, all that different than you were. But they do figure it out themselves and find their own path. So be reassured that my daughter does. She was an only child, and I think that might have a factor to do with it. And your daughter being the oldest of three may also have a factor to it. So obviously, those dynamics do shape who she will ultimately be. But I think the good news is that they do watch us, but they do learn from their own conclusions that they draw, and it's not solely dependent on us. But if it does help you to take care of yourself, so you can role model something else, and I say that's good too, right? Because we that is what we're trying to teach our daughters for sure. So here we are again at 26 minutes. We love talking, and these topics are so close to our hearts because we're talking about our daughters as well and our children and how we mother. So, another quick episode that has gone on between you and I, Alyssa.
Yeah, and I think that actually it made me think of, I think for, the next time we talk, because we're kind of hinting at it, it's talking about the female and male brain. I know that was on our list of topics, but we're kind of, again, segueing into that. So that might be like the next place we go, because we'll see what we come up between now and our next episode. But thank you to all of our listeners, and we hope that you will give us your insights and thoughts, and we hope to talk soon.
One more thing before we finally cut off, I just want to say thank you to those listeners who reached out to us via email and voicemail on the Anchor platform. Please know that we love to hear from you, and you can always drop us a note at thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com. And it's very exciting when we hear from you. So please shoot us some feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. Bye for now, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions, or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.